If only I had listened, maybe my father would still be here. A compound is not just walls and roof. It's laughter. It's discipline. It's love. Until it breaks. There was a time our home smelled like ogbono soup and fresh harmattan breeze. It was a small bungalow in the heart of Enugu, nestled at the end of a red sand road where children ran barefoot and old men sipped palm wine under almond trees. The zinc roof was patched in places, and the cement walls had faded to a chalky gray, but it was ours. I was only 8 then. My name is Daniel, but everyone called me Danny Boy. I lived with my father, Papa Ikenna, a quiet, principled man with a strong back and softer eyes, and my mother, Mama Ijeoma, who could pound yam with one hand and hush a crying baby with the other. In the mornings, I'd wake to the sound of her broom sweeping the front compound, her wrapper tied tightly as she muttered morning prayers. The smell of wood smoke, early morning dew, and the neighbor's akara frying in hot oil filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played Sunny Ade's Jafunmi. Daniel, wake up! It's time to fetch water. My mother's voice would ring. I'd groan, sometimes pretend to still be asleep. My father would appear at the door, tall and calm, his face unreadable. Lazy boy, he'd say in a half-joking tone, do you want to grow up and marry sleep? We would all laugh. Our home had rhythm. Papa would go to work in his brown trousers and faded shirt, clutching his radio and flask. Mama would tend her small okra garden. I would go to school with my dusty sandals and oversized school bag. Every Sunday, Papa would carry me on his shoulder to church. I'd rest my head on his, smell the palm kernel oil in his hair, and feel safe. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he spoke, it stuck. Respect your elders. A child who doesn't listen will follow the hyena into the bush. He told stories under the moonlight, the kind that carried hidden truths, like the one about the stubborn tortoise who lost his shell because he thought he was cleverer than the gods. Back then, I didn't understand what he was teaching. I only saw a father who loved me and sometimes annoyed me. We were not rich, but we had peace. In the evenings, Mama would serve dinner, steaming plates of iba and ogbono, sometimes fried yam and pepper sauce. The chickens clucked nearby, and the air was full of soft banter from neighboring compounds. Papa would sit on his plastic chair by the doorway, sipping hot tea. He'd ask me about school. Did you greet your teacher? Yes, sir. Did you fight again? No, sir. I'd lie, swallowing hard. He'd nod, eyes still on me. He always knew when I was lying. But he wouldn't shout. Not yet. Mama believed I was just playful. He's a boy, she'd say. He will grow out of it. Papa would only sigh. When a child plays with fire, does the house not burn? Still, that house, our house, was whole then, full of small joys, full of life. Before I began to test its walls with my behavior, before I pushed too far, before I broke something I could never fix. When the mango is still green, it does not know the pain of the stone. They said I had energy. But Papa said what I had was restlessness without direction. As I grew older, that peaceful rhythm in our home began to shift because of me. It started small. I would skip my morning chores. While Mama swept and fetched water, I would pretend to help, only to sneak away to play football with the older boys behind the Anglican church compound. Danny boy, Mama would shout, her voice cracking the air like a whip. I'm coming, I'd yell back, but I wouldn't. When Papa came home and asked, did you carry the water today? I'd say yes, with sand still stuck between my toes and guilt hiding in my eyes. At school, I was worse. I would talk during lessons, draw cartoons on my notebooks, or throw paper missiles at other pupils. Once I locked a classmate in the school toilet as a joke. The poor boy screamed until the headmistress came and found him. I was suspended for 3 days. Papa was summoned. He stood outside the staff room in his old sandals and iron shirt, holding a plastic chair in one hand and his disappointment in the other. Why? He asked on the walk home. I shrugged. You locked someone inside the toilet. For what? I don't know, I muttered. That evening, he didn't eat much. He just sat outside, his radio beside him, volume low. I remember the faint sound of rain tapping the zinc roof as he cleaned his spectacles and stared into nothing. Still, I didn't stop. One afternoon, Mama left a steaming pot of ogbono soup on the fire while she went to call Auntie Ngozi from the next compound. I was hungry. I opened the lid. The aroma hit me like drumbeat, thick, rich, smoky. I dipped a piece of bread into the soup, then another, and another. Before I knew it, I had picked out all the meat, every single one. Mama cried when she returned and saw the bones floating in oil. She didn't beat me. She just sat on the kitchen stool, staring at the pot with tears rolling down her cheeks. Later, Papa came home and saw her quiet like that. She only said, "Your son has finished the soup." He sighed and looked at me. "Do you eat alone in this house?" he asked. "No, sir." "So why did you eat all the meat?" I looked down. He shook his head and walked away. At night, he called me to sit beside him. The stars blinked above like silent witnesses. "Mary boy," he said gently, "every act has weight, even a child's behavior." I said nothing. "You think it's just meat, but you're feeding your character with selfishness. One day, that thing will grow and swallow you." I rolled my eyes when he turned away. I thought he was being dramatic. I was a boy. Boys misbehave. No big deal. But Papa saw something I didn't see. He was worried, and slowly I noticed. His laughter started coming less often. Mama still covered for me. "He's just stubborn," she said. "Children change with time." But Papa said something that would haunt me later. A stubborn goat does not wait for the rope to tighten before it learns. It learns when it is too late. I wish I had listened. The child who refuses to hear will feel with tears. Papa didn't shout. That was the scary part. While other fathers in our neighborhood raised their voices like thunder, mine spoke with a kind of calm that made you feel the weight of your wrongs deeper. After the school suspension, after the stolen soup meat, after I pushed our neighbor's son into the gutter during an argument, Papa sat me down one Sunday evening. It was one of those quiet Enugu evenings. The sun was setting behind the zinc rooftops, casting long shadows across our compound. The smell of burnt firewood lingered from the neighbor's cooking. In the distance, a radio played Osadabe's Osandi Owendi. Papa poured hot Lipton tea into a metal cup. Mama had just returned from evening mass, her wrapper tied loosely around her waist, sweat glistening on her forehead. "Danny boy," he called gently. I came and stood in front of him, head down. "Sit." I sat. He took a deep breath, then began. "You see, when a yam stays too long in the sun, it starts to crack," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. "Your ways are beginning to crack this house." I fidgeted. "You don't listen to your mother. You fight in school. You steal meat from the pot. You lie. You insult elders. You dodge chores. Is that how a son is supposed to behave?" Silence. "I'm talking to you." "I'm sorry, sir," I muttered. He nodded slowly, but he didn't smile. "The child who refuses to hear," he said, his voice low, "will feel with tears." Then, like thunder from behind the clouds, Mama burst in. "Haba, leave the boy alone. You act like you were born holy," she snapped, dropping her basket of okra on the floor. "He's a child. They misbehave. Abi, you didn't do your own when you were young?" Papa looked at her, expression unchanged. "I'm not asking him to be perfect. I'm asking him to respect. Respect the house that feeds him. Respect the hands that raise him. Is that too much?" Mama folded her arms, tired. "He'll grow out of it." Papa turned back to me. "But what if he doesn't?" His words cut deeper than any cane. Later that night, as the compound grew quiet and the stars blinked in the black sky, I heard Mama and Papa arguing softly through their bedroom window. "I'm doing my best, Ijeoma," Papa said, "but I'm tired. I can't fight this alone." "He's a child. He just needs time." "Time?" He sighed. "Time is not what changes a child. Correction does. Consequence does. Don't talk like you're giving up." "I'm not giving up," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "but I'm beginning to feel like I'm shouting into a cave, and caves don't echo unless they are empty." That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid on my raffia mat, staring at the ceiling, the fan turning slowly above me. The mosquitoes hummed in the corners. The drums from a distant wedding carried through the night air. But in my heart, there was no rhythm, only guilt and fear. I didn't understand fully, but something in me knew a storm was coming, and the center of that storm was me. When a child throws faces in the market, his own mother cannot cover her face. The day it happened, Enugu was hot and loud. The sun hung high like a punishment, and even the hawkers had grown quiet from the heat. I was in my school uniform, walking home with dust on my shoes and anger in my chest. Earlier that day, I had gotten into another fight. This time it was with Ola, the headmistress's nephew. He had mocked me for repeating primary 4. I told him to shut up. He laughed louder. So I did what I always did when I felt small. I fought back. I pushed him. He pushed me. And then I slapped him hard across the face. He fell and landed on the assembly platform. His mouth began to bleed. Everyone screamed. Teachers rushed out. I didn't run. I just stood there, breathing fast, watching the red trickle from Ola's lip. The next hour was a blur of shouting, dragging, and punishment. I was marched to the headmistress's office. Again, and this time, they didn't call Mama. They called Papa. He arrived an hour later, dust clinging to his brown trousers, sweat lining the edges of his cap. He looked calm, too calm. The entire school gathered under the mango tree, parents, pupils, teachers, all watching. It had become a scene. The headmistress, a short round woman with sharp eyes, didn't spare him. Your son is a disgrace to this school, to this town. He's violent, he's rude, he's uncontrollable. You, his father, what exactly are you doing at home? Papa didn't say a word. She turned to me. Say sorry to Ola. I looked away. Say it, she screamed. I'm not sorry, I shouted back. He started it. The murmurs from the crowd rose. People shook their heads. Someone said, this one, his head is already gone. Papa still said nothing, not one word. We walked home in silence. That evening, Papa called me to the backyard. The sky was turning orange, and the scent of Mama's agusi soup floated from the kitchen window. He stared at me for a long time. His voice was low. You've disgraced me, my son. I looked up. He wasn't angry. No, he was wounded. Do you know what it means for a father to be called to school and hear his own son being called an animal in public? I blinked. You didn't just fight a boy. You fought everything I've tried to raise you to be. Papa, You slapped the headmistress's nephew in front of the whole school. You shouted back. You refused to apologize. He looked at his hands. Do you think this is the man I want to raise? I swallowed hard. I said I'm sorry, I muttered. He turned away from me. No, you're not. And then he said the words that chilled my bones. You're not just hurting yourself anymore. You are staining this house with shame. That night, he didn't touch his food. He didn't touch his tea. He just sat on the wooden bench in front of the compound, staring into the dark as Mama hummed quietly inside the kitchen and stirred the soup. I heard the neighbors whispering, "Na so children they destroy man's reputation. She be na this same boy they steal meat the other day." From my corner in the room, I felt their words pierce me deeper than any cane. But it was Papa's silence that hurt the most. He no longer corrected me with raised voices. He corrected me with withdrawal, and I didn't know I was close to breaking something that may never be fixed. Even the strongest rope snaps when pulled too tight. For weeks after the school disgrace, Papa hardly spoke to me. He would wake up before sunrise, iron his clothes in silence, and head to work without a word. At night, he would sit under the mango tree with his radio and flask of tea alone. Mama tried to patch things as always. She cooked his favorite meals, ofa onugbu, yam porridge, white rice with fried stew and smoked Titus, but even food lost its taste in a house with no peace. I, on the other hand, grew more defiant. Somewhere deep inside, I was ashamed. But I didn't know how to say sorry. So instead of changing, I became worse. One Thursday evening, something happened that would mark the turning point. It started with a simple errand. Mama had sent me to buy kerosene from Mama Nkechi's shop before the sun went down. She gave me 300 naira and warned me not to stop and play ball. But the boys were already at the main road junction, shouting my name and bouncing a flat football. "Danny boy, 1 goal before you go." I couldn't resist. The 1 goal became 2, then 3, then 4. By the time I reached Mama Nkechi's shop, she had locked up. I returned home empty-handed and sweaty. Mama stood at the entrance, wrapper tied tightly, pestle still in her hand from pounding yam. "Where's the kerosene?" she asked. "She no gree sell," I said casually. "Why?" I hesitated. "She say she don't have change." Before she could ask further, Papa stepped out of the house. He had just returned from work, his shirt stained with sweat, eyes red from fatigue. "What's going on?" he asked. Mama turned to him. "I sent your son to buy kerosene. He played ball and came back with lies." I flinched. "You played football?" Papa asked. I didn't answer. "Didn't your mother send you?" I shrugged. I forgot. That word, forgot. It snapped something in him. Before I could blink, his voice thundered. "Forgot? Forgot what? That you're part of a family? That you have responsibility? That money is not easy to come by?" I said I'm sorry, I shouted, but Papa was already walking toward me. And then, for the first time in my life, he raised his hand and slapped me. The slap didn't just land on my face, it landed in my heart. Everything stopped. The chickens paused. The pounding mortar next door went quiet. Even the radio from the neighbor's house seemed to hush. I touched my cheek in shock. Mama screamed, "Ikenna, you slapped him?" Papa's chest was rising and falling fast. His eyes were filled with something I had never seen before, exhaustion and despair. He took a step back, like he was afraid of himself. "I didn't mean," he whispered. Then he looked at me one last time and said, "If I stay in this house, I will lose my mind." He turned and went inside. That night, the compound was too quiet. The frogs croaked in the gutter, the fan creaked in slow circles, and Mama's tears tapped softly into her basin as she washed plates with shaking hands. I stayed in my corner, nursing my face and my pride. But deep inside, a fear began to grow. What did he mean? If I stay? I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of the end. The morning my world cracked open didn't start with thunder. It started with silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest like heavy humidity before a storm. Mama's voice was the first to break it. "Daniel, have you seen your papa?" Her wrapper was tied loosely, hair scarf askew, as if sleep had run from her eyes all night. I blinked, still half asleep. "No, Mama, maybe he's outside." But Papa wasn't outside. Not by the mango tree, where he often sat to polish his shoes. Not near the old black radio he loved to tune each morning to NTA Enugu for 6 a.m. news. Not even by the clay basin where he usually fetched water before sunrise. Gone. Mama saw it. An envelope tucked underneath the lantern on the stool. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Her eyes scanned the words. Her lips parted. Then a sound tore from her throat, a sound I had never heard before. Not a scream, not a cry, a raw, trembling sob that shook me more than any slap ever could. She fell to the floor, wrapper spilling like waves around her waist. I ran and grabbed the note. I wish I hadn't. "Ijeoma, I have failed in my duty to raise a son with discipline. I tried, I really tried, but the disrespect, the shame, it has eaten my peace. Maybe this house will find peace without me. Tell Daniel I love him, but love alone is not enough, Ikenna." I read it again and again, each word sliced deeper. I wanted to believe it was a joke, but Papa didn't joke. That day, it felt like the compound changed. The hens clucked differently. The neighbors' mortar pounding felt like echoes of heartbreak. Even the scent of Mama's usual akara seemed bitter, burnt. Mama sat on the floor for hours, silent, unmoving. I stood in the doorway holding the note like it might suddenly catch fire and vanish. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too confused. "Why?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She just looked at me. And I saw it in her eyes. Not anger, not hate, but something worse. Disappointment. Days passed. Papa didn't come back. I watched as Mama's shoulders grew heavier. She carried her market basket with a slump. She barely ate. The house, once filled with arguments and laughter, now echoed only chores. Everywhere I turned, Papa's absence screamed, his slippers still by the door, his old shaving stick untouched, his chair, the one under the pawpaw tree, empty. At night, I would lie awake, the hum of insects buzzing outside the window, thinking, what did I do? Was it because I shouted at him? Was it the time I stole the money for groundnut? Or when I refused to greet Elder Uche? Guilt crawled into my bones like cold. Mama hardly spoke those days. But one night, she whispered, your father was a good man, but even a river runs dry if you throw too many stones in it. I finally cried. Not like a child denied sweets, but the kind of crying that shakes your belly and makes your throat burn. That was the night I realized he didn't leave because he stopped loving me. He left because I never showed him I loved him back. I hugged Mama tightly, pressing my head against her chest. I'm sorry, I whispered. She didn't respond. But her arms wrapped around me, and in the silence, I heard the answer. And still, Papa didn't return. Not the next day, not the next week, not even after I cleaned the compound for the first time without being told. He was gone, but his absence remained louder than his presence ever was. And slowly, painfully, I began to understand. The compound was not the same. Ever since Papa left, silence settled in our home like harmattan dust, thick, dry, and choking. His slippers no longer sat by the door. His transistor radio, always tuned to NTA Enugu or BBC Igbo service, no longer hummed in the corner. And his laughter, that full, deep belly laugh, had vanished like smoke in the wind. Mama tried to hold everything together, but how much can one woman carry? Each morning, she tied her old wrapper tightly around her waist and set out to sell tomatoes and pepper at Ogbete Market. She'd return late, exhausted, with aching feet and barely enough money to cook a small pot of soup. Even then, she still managed to smile at me, though her eyes carried shadows. Bills started piling up. School fees were overdue. Our compound landlord, Baba Chijioke, began knocking more often, tapping the wooden door with a tone that grew less patient each week. Madam, I know say you dey try, but house no go pay itself. Mama would bow slightly and promise, next week e go complete. But it never did. I began to feel the weight of Papa's absence, the weight of my actions. Because deep down, I knew it was my fault. One night, rain began to fall. Not the gentle type, but angry, unrelenting rain that pounded the zinc roof like it was judging us. Mama and I sat in the dark with only the glow from a small, rechargeable lamp between us. Our food was plain gari soaked with sugar. No soup, no meat, just silence and the sound of thunder groaning in the sky. Mama sighed, rubbing her temples slowly. If your father was here, things would be different, she whispered. Not out of anger, but sorrow. I couldn't answer. I couldn't look her in the eyes. I turned to the old dining table. Papa's chair was still there, empty, untouched, like it was waiting for him to return. I started to watch it every evening. Sometimes I imagined him walking in again, with his shirt half buttoned, carrying firewood or palm wine, calling out, Daniel, where is that stubborn head? But it never happened. Instead, I woke up to the sound of Mama pounding yam alone. I walked home to find her scrubbing the compound floor by herself. I sat at dinner and stared at that chair, empty. The neighbors noticed the change too. Where is your father? Small children would ask during evening football. I would smile faintly. He traveled. Even though I knew, he traveled far from us, from me. One Saturday, as Mama folded old clothes in the sun, she said, you know, your papa used to sing to me when I was pregnant with you, under that mango tree. She pointed across the compound, a place I used to play, a place I once kicked dust and spat in rebellion. But now I just stared at it. A proverb whispered in my mind. One papa used to say often, when the drum beats, the wise dance early. But I had refused to dance. Now the music had stopped. The weight of his absence was more than physical. It was in every empty moment, every unspoken sentence, every sigh Mama let out when she thought I wasn't looking. And for the first time, I missed him not just as a father, but as a man I had pushed away. The days turned to weeks, weeks folded into months, and slowly, like morning dew under the sun, I began to change. Mama never said it aloud, but I saw it in her eyes, the weariness. Her wrapper hung looser, her laughter rare. Even her footsteps, once loud and lively in the corridor, now dragged like old slippers. One evening I caught her in the backyard, kneeling beside the mortar, pounding yam alone. Her back curved like a tired question mark. I stood there, frozen. I remembered how Papa would help her pound while humming an old Igbo love song, and I, too busy being stubborn, would sneak meat from the pot. That night, I couldn't eat. The pounded yam tasted like regret. From that moment, something inside me cracked, and something else began to grow. I started fetching water from the community borehole before Mama woke. I swept the compound. I even joined small errands for Mama Ngozi across the street. The same woman who once called me a disgraceful goat now said, "Chai, see Daniel O. He's changing like dry season to rainy season." But it wasn't about impressing anyone. I just wanted to feel peace again, that peace that left when Papa walked away. At school, I stopped fighting. I paid attention. My teacher, Mr. Naji, even called my name during assembly one morning. "Daniel," he said, voice proud, "you have become a fine example. Keep it up." I didn't smile, because even praise felt heavy without Papa to hear it. At night, when the generator buzzed and Mama listened to her usual radio program by lantern light, I would sit at the doorway, staring at the moon. I'd remember Papa's voice. Respect is like palm oil. It sweetens every food, even bitter leaf. I remembered how he used to comb my hair every Sunday morning before church. How he'd say, "Daniel, a good name is better than gold." Tears would sting my eyes, but I wouldn't let them fall. Boys weren't supposed to cry, or so I thought. One Sunday after church, while Mama napped under the ceiling fan, I walked to the old bench under the mango tree, Papa's favorite spot. The air was still, only the chirp of crickets and the distant clang of a pestle echoed. I sat there, the wood creaking softly beneath me. My fingers traced the initials Papa carved into the wood, K-O-4-I-N. His name, Kenneth Obi. My mother's, Ijeoma Nnamdi. "Love once lived here," I broke. The tears flowed freely. "I'm sorry, Papa," I whispered. "If you can hear me, I'm sorry for everything." A gentle breeze passed, rustling the mango leaves above. I closed my eyes and imagined he was there, his rough hand on my shoulder, that scent of sandalwood and aftershave he always carried. "I'll make you proud. I promise." From that day on, I visited the bench every week. Sometimes I'd bring Akara and Zobo. Other days, I'd just sit and talk. To the wind, the leaves, the silence. It became my sacred place. A reminder of what I lost and who I needed to become. They say when a child falls, he looks forward. But when an elder falls, he looks back to see what made him stumble. I had fallen hard. But now I was looking forward, with a heart that finally understood. And though Papa was gone, his voice echoed in everything I did, like a drumbeat in my soul. The Harmattan winds had returned to Enugu, drying the air and painting every rooftop with red dust. That morning, Daniel stood by the roadside, clutching a plastic bag filled with bread and groundnut, headed for his weekend teaching class. He had grown taller, more quiet, more aware. His school shirt was neatly tucked, his shoes dusty but polished. The boy who once couldn't sit still for 5 minutes now led junior students in morning devotion. As he crossed the busy junction near Ogui Road, his eyes caught sight of a familiar frame, an old man sitting under the shade of an udala tree beside a barber shop. The man wore a faded green cap, his sandals worn thin at the heels, his posture still noble, but aged by life. Ibuka's heart stopped. "Papa?" He froze. The word had escaped his lips before he realized. The man turned. Time stood still. Their eyes met, brown into brown. The same eyes that once stared at him across a dinner table, the same hands that used to lift him high when Nipa brought back light. Now those hands trembled slightly as the old man removed his cap. "Daniel?" The voice cracked like old wood. The boy walked slowly, like someone approaching a ghost. His chest rose and fell like a beating drum, echoing with memories. They stood inches apart, unsure. Then the boy dropped his bag, fell to his knees, and burst into tears. "I'm sorry, Papa. I'm sorry for everything. Please, forgive me." The old man knelt too, right there on the dusty roadside. Passers-by slowed, some watched, but no one interrupted. Something sacred was happening. "You were a child," his father whispered, tears streaking his cheeks. "I was too proud. I should have stayed." Their foreheads touched. The sun filtered through the leaves. A Barrow Boys radio played an old Onyeka Onwenu song in the background. Somewhere nearby, someone pounded yam in rhythm. After a long silence, they sat on a wooden bench nearby. "Where did you go?" Daniel asked. "I moved to Nsukka, worked at a mechanic shop for a while, slept in the back room. I wrote letters, but I never sent them. I thought maybe you all would be better without me." Daniel shook his head. "We weren't. Mama suffered. I saw her cry at night." The father sighed deeply, pain etched into his brow. "I lost myself, Daniel. I didn't know how to father a son who didn't listen. And when I raised my hand that day, I swore I'd never do it again, so I left to protect you from my anger." Daniel nodded slowly. "I wish I could go back and undo everything." "But you can't," his father replied. "What you can do is move forward. You've become a man now, I can see that." He smiled faintly. "You even walk like your grandfather." Daniel chuckled through his tears. "I miss you, Papa, every day. And I miss you, my son." They sat in silence, the world spinning gently around them. "Come home," Daniel said at last. "Mama still lays out your wrapper on Sundays." The old man smiled. "Let me finish something here. I will come, but only if you promise me." "I'll never stop listening again," Abuka interrupted, voice firm. His father reached out and held his hand. "Then I'm coming home." The two stood, brushing dust from their clothes, hearts lighter than they'd been in years. As they walked down the street, side by side, a child pointed and whispered, "See that man and his boy. Dem look alike like bread and butter." And the wind carried the scent of roasted plantain. A proverb whispered in the air, "No matter how far the stream flows, it never forgets its source." Many of us don't realize the weight of our actions until the silence they leave behind becomes unbearable. The boy, now a young man, had learned. But he had learned too late. His father did not die. No, life did not take him. But pain drove him away. Not poverty, not temptation, not illness, but the pain of raising a child who mocked his love, who spat on his sacrifice, and who only saw the light after the sun had set. In African homes, discipline is not hatred. A father's raised voice is not violence. A mother's tears are not weakness. They are love, raw and unpolished, but love still. In those early days, when ogbono soup still bubbled in the pot and chickens clucked in the yard, the boy had everything. He had a father who rose early and returned late, all to give him a better life. But he chose noise over wisdom. He chose stubbornness over listening. He chose self over family. And when the home cracked, the roof did not fall immediately. No, it caved in slowly. It began with small arguments. Then came disrespect. Then came shame in public. And then silence. The kind of silence that eats your soul at night. That silence stole his father from their compound. A chair remained where the man once sat. A chair that no one touched. A chair that seemed to whisper, "You pushed him away." There's an Igbo proverb that says, "A child who does not listen to his father's call will listen to the drumbeat of the grave." This tale is not just about one boy. It is about many boys and girls, many mothers, fathers, and homes, because every day across Enugu, Accra, Kumasi, children are choosing pride over peace. They raise their voices at those who raised them. They laugh in the face of warnings. They play with fire, forgetting that it can burn. Sometimes love walks away because discipline stayed behind. There is nothing more heartbreaking than a home where regret has replaced laughter. Nothing more painful than a child who waits until the grave to say, "Daddy, I'm sorry." But to the young ones watching now, you still have time. If your father is still alive, go to him. If your mother still calls your name, answer with respect. Do not wait until your apology becomes a whisper in the wind. This story ends not with death, but with lesson. The boy and his father reunited. But scars remain. Scars of what was lost. Scars of what could have been. Scars that say, never again. So let this tale not end in your house. Let it be a mirror, a warning, a healing. Your actions have consequences, and the people you hurt today may be the ones you'll need tomorrow. Let the children listen. Let the parents guide, and let the home be whole again. Dedicated to every parent who left in silence and every child who learned too late.